Clarence is an American animated series created by Skyler Page for Cartoon Network. It follows Clarence Wendle, a fun-loving, adventurous kid, and his two best friends, Jeff, the brainy thinker, and Sumo, who always goes all out to solve problems. Set in the quirky town of Aberdale, Arizona, the show explores their everyday adventures, school life, and the colorful people around them. Clarence lives with his mom, Mary, and her boyfriend, Chad, adding a relatable family dynamic to the mix. What really makes Clarence special is how it captures childhood in a way that's funny, heartfelt, and surprisingly realistic. The fans have called it the Black Panther for middle-class kids who couldn't afford cruises but still got an Xbox for Christmas. Nevertheless, the show remains a standout Cartoon Network classic. So without further ado, let's begin. Bernstein introduces a new kid named Clarence to the class, and since he wants to be popular and make friends, he invites everyone to a sleepover at his house, including his teacher. When Clarence gets home, he sees dozens of pizza poppers his mom made, so he starts to worry that no one will come. However, his mom soon leaves for a party, kisses him goodbye, and Clarence is left home alone. After a while, Clarence receives a phone call from Jeff, who says he will come over at 5 p.m. When Jeff arrives, Clarence excitedly shows him all the fun activities they can do, but Jeff is not interested, and instead chooses to sit quietly and watch a trivia show. Even so, Clarence stays with him and tries to enjoy it too. Soon after, Sumo shows up and asks Clarence to cut his hair, so they go up to the treehouse. During the haircut, the basket suddenly falls and breaks. Sumo then notices that Jeff is still not playing, so he asks Clarence about it. Because of this, Clarence and Sumo decide to show Jeff how to have fun. They dress up in gothic clothes, dance into the living room, and blast music, but this still does not work since Jeff is a germaphobe. Later, Chad joins Jeff and casually drinks milk straight from the carton. Clarence and Sumo then trick Jeff into making a prank call, although they quickly stop it when Jeff panics. Later, it is time for the mystery piñata, and Jeff finally gets excited. However, when he breaks it, a swarm of bees bursts out, causing chaos. In the end, Clarence, Jeff, and Sumo sit shirtless on the couch, covered in bee stings, eating ice cream. Clarence apologizes, but his friends are not mad. Clarence waits outside the school until his mom, Mary, pulls up in her car. When she arrives, Clarence tells her that Jeff has invited him over after school. Mary agrees to drop him off, but first she needs to go grocery shopping. Clarence complains and says he hates the store because it is boring, but after some convincing, he finally agrees to go along. Inside the supermarket, Clarence bumps into an obese woman riding a motorized shopping cart and mistakes it for a go-kart. Mary quickly tells him that is rude, so they head in another direction. They pick up organic grapes, and while Mary is not looking, Clarence sneaks one from the bag. Katie notices this and tries to get him in trouble for stealing. Mary jokes that she will turn Clarence into the cops, which scares him, while Katie laughs smugly. Later, Mary sends Clarence on a special mission to find skim milk. The milk is on a high shelf at the very back, so Clarence climbs up to reach it. Instead, he discovers a supply room behind the shelf and starts messing around, swinging a fly swatter, slipping on a banana peel, and exploring. Suddenly, a worker appears and startles him. Clarence panics and hides on a conveyor belt, which carries him into the meat aisle. There, an old woman mistakes Clarence for steak, pokes and squeezes him, and places him in her cart. As she pushes him through the store, Clarence spots Sumo and explains what happened, leaving Sumo completely confused. Noticing that Sumo is sitting in the kid's seat of the cart, Clarence asks why he is there. Sumo explains that his mom makes him sit there because of what happened last time. When Clarence asks what happened, Sumo only points to a nearby store worker named Joshua Maverick, who has a noticeable scar on his face. When Joshua sees Sumo, he glares at him and rubs the scar, strongly hinting that Sumo caused it. Clarence climbs out of the cart, and he and Sumo start fooling around, which creates a mess that cashier Josh is told to clean up. Soon after, the boys run into Clarence's mom, Mary, and her coupons go flying everywhere. Almost immediately, other shoppers rush in and grab the coupons for themselves, leaving Mary upset. Feeling guilty, Clarence gives her the skim milk he found, but without the coupons, Mary sadly starts putting the groceries back on the shelves. Wanting to fix his mistake, Clarence decides to get more coupons with Sumo's help. However, Sumo is spotted and chased by Joshua. During this, Clarence also runs into Katie again, who tries to get him in trouble, but Clarence distracts her by pretending to throw a smoke bomb and escapes with the coupons. He returns them to Mary, just as the store manager stops Joshua from chasing Sumo, completely ignoring that Joshua looks roughed up and is missing a chunk of hair. At checkout, Mary's total comes to $280, but after using the coupons, it drops to just $10. Later, Mary drops Clarence off at Jeff's house, where they watch a parody of The Price is Right. Later on, Clarence correctly guesses the price, and Jeff angrily turns off the TV. The school bus arrives at the zoo, and all the kids excitedly step off. Belson immediately complains about the trip, and Clarence runs up to him, saying he forgot his juice box. Belson tells Clarence to go find his loser friends Jeff and Sumo, but Clarence explains they are both sick and could not come. Ms. Baker then gives the class an activity where they must figure out which animal stole the zoo key. Since Clarence and Belson sat next to each other on the bus, they are assigned as seat buddies for the entire day, which annoys Belson. Baker also explains that because Bryn is allergic to peanuts, they must avoid certain areas of the zoo, which disappoints everyone. The class waits in a long line to see the turtles, but it takes so long that Belson gets bored and walks off, saying he will solve the mystery later. Clarence follows him, happily admiring every animal they pass, even pigeons and squirrels. Belson is unimpressed and says those animals are everywhere. Clarence, however, is amazed and even makes up his own questions when he notices some animals are not listed on his worksheet. Belson tries to walk faster to escape Clarence, but Clarence keeps up with him. They later reach the dolphin tank, only to find it closed, which makes Belson angry. A zookeeper tells him to stop banging on the glass. Clarence keeps trying to cheer Belson up by showing him more animals and even getting their picture painted together, but no matter what Clarence does, Belson refuses to enjoy the trip. An ambulance arrives at the zoo after Bryn has a serious allergic reaction from eating a peanut butter sandwich, and the paramedics rush him to the hospital. Because of this, Ms. Baker tells the class to get back on the bus, which disappoints everyone. Nathan gets furious and punches Percy and Bryn for ruining the trip, but Ms. Baker quickly scolds him as he storms off. While checking that everyone has their buddy, Ms. Baker does not realize that Clarence and Belson are missing. Meanwhile, Clarence and Belson are still inside the zoo looking at the bat. Clarence learns about echolocation and tries to copy it, but he only ends up knocking things over. Belson snaps and calls Clarence annoying, so Clarence decides to copy Belson's attitude and pretends to hate everything. This upsets Belson, who says that is not who he really is, and walks away. Soon they realize it is nighttime and the zoo is closed. Belson panics, but Clarence stays cheerful and enjoys saying goodnight to the animals. Belson admits he likes dolphins and is disappointed they were not there earlier. Clarence figures that if the tank was closed, the dolphins must be somewhere else. Using the map, he notices they never visited the animal church, so they sneak over and finally find the dolphins. Belson is amazed, but the zookeeper catches them. Miss Baker arrives and promises the police it will not happen again, then scolds the boys while drifting into a daydream. Belson suddenly explains that the zebra stole the key and that Clarence solved the mystery. Clarence tries to celebrate with a big hug, but it does not go as planned, staring at the clock and waiting for it to turn 5:00. As soon as it does, he excitedly starts his morning routine. He begins by watching an exercise commercial in his underwear and pretending to work out, after which he takes a shower by opening the dishwasher and letting the steam cover him. He then cleans the kitchen, but makes a big mess while trying to scramble eggs. After that, Clarence spends time playing with his toys, tries to travel back in time using a cardboard box, eats breakfast with lots of whipped cream, measures his height, and even wakes up Mary and Chad to motivate them in their sleep. He then goes outside to collect trash for his raccoon friends, but they quickly scare him away. In the front yard, Clarence notices the garbage truck doing its weekly route and tries to start a friendly conversation with the sanitation worker, Lucine. She warns him to stay away because the truck is dangerous, but Clarence keeps talking. To scare him off, Lucine has her co-worker Gary show Clarence his hand, which is missing a finger from a garbage accident. Clarence starts telling his own garbage story, but Lucine sends him home and drives away. Later, Clarence sits on his porch playing with a chicken when his friend Randy rides by delivering newspapers. Clarence helps deliver a few papers after trading a granola bar, but he quickly gets tired and collapses on the sidewalk. A few moments later, Clarence is woken by a police siren and runs toward a passing patrol car to ask if there's a manhunt. The officer tells him a mountain lion is loose in the city and warns him to go home for safety. Undeterred, Clarence goes into his backyard to feed the raccoons, only to find the mountain lion there, scaring the raccoons up a tree. Terrified, Clarence runs through the streets screaming until he reaches the police and sheriff, who rush toward his backyard, drawing the attention of Randy and Lucine. Outside Clarence's backyard, firefighters try to capture the mountain lion. The sheriff apologizes to Clarence for having to tranquilize the animal, and Clarence responds that he's sorry too before telling the mountain lion to run. The mountain lion climbs a tree with the raccoons, but the branch snaps and lands on a live power line. Clarence grabs a police speaker and tries to talk to the mountain lion, but it doesn't work. The sheriff shoots tranquilizer darts at the mountain lion and raccoons, and the firefighters safely catch them mall. As the animals are taken away, Clarence pets one of the raccoons, but the sheriff quickly warns him that they could have rabies. Exhausted, Clarence returns to his bedroom and collapses on his bed as the clock strikes 6:59 a.m. Mary walks by and tells him to get up because she's making egg salad, which makes Clarence smile, ending the chaotic adventure on a cheerful note. A commercial for the monster truck joust rally featuring Rake Backburn plays on TV while Mary and Chad get ready to go see the event, leaving Clarence home alone for the first time. Before leaving, Chad gives Clarence a slow, drawn-out man-of-the-house speech, and Mary double-checks if he really wants to stay behind. Clarence insists he just wants some alone time to play with his toys and maybe go to bed early, giving them an innocent, adorable look. Once Mary and Chad leave, Clarence calls Jeff and Sumo to come over, saying they can do whatever they want. Clarence daydreams about playing poker with dogs. Jeff imagines cleaning the house while Sumo and Clarence hide in the closet, and Sumo fantasizes about being a general and separating Florida from the rest of the US. Back at home, Clarence and Sumo start playing with the sink sprinkler, toss sandwiches and frozen waffles for a makeshift baseball game, and create a toy-nado chaos. Later, they play monster truck joust, but it's interrupted when Clarence is revealed to be commando under his box. The boys then play bowling with kitchen items, with Clarence winning the game. During a trust fall game, Clarence daydreams about Chad as a naval officer, reminding him that he needs to be responsible since Chad is counting on him. They watch a TV program about home protection, which makes the boys nervous about burglars. Just then, a storm begins, and a brief power outage occurs, leaving Clarence, Jeff, and Sumo startled and anxious about the safety of the house. At the monster truck joust, Mary notices that it's starting to rain, so Chad pulls out an umbrella, and they share a kiss. The announcer mentions that anyone with backstage passes can meet Rake Backburn in person. Mary wishes they had passes, and it turns out Chad did get them, but he accidentally left them at home. He rushes off to retrieve the passes. Back at Clarence's house, Clarence, Jeff, and Sumo have set up a ton of man-traps in every room to protect against burglars. When Chad arrives, they initially mistake him for a burglar, but quickly realize it's just him. Chad explains he needs to come inside to look for something, so the boys let him in, but they have to carefully remove all the traps before he can enter the room safely. After getting the backstage passes, Chad leaves the house unharmed. However, the boys forget to remove the trap on the front door, and when Chad returns, he gets hurt and has to be taken to the hospital. Mary comes home from the joust and congratulates Clarence for taking good care of the house, but when she steps inside, she sees the huge mess and yells for him. Clarence isn't there. He's riding in Rake Backburn's monster truck. Rake assures him that Clarence's mom will be fine after a few laps around the neighborhood. Kimby, Cortland, and Melessica are excitedly talking about a slumber party they're planning. Kimby had intended to invite Darlie, but she got sick in gym and went home early. Meanwhile, in class, Clarence distracts Jeff by putting pencils in his mouth and pretending to write with them, eventually falling off his seat and claiming he's a pencil walrus. The whole class laughs until Ms. Baker moves Jeff to the front row. On his desk, Jeff finds an invitation meant for Darlie and mistakenly thinks he's invited. After class, the girls discuss what they're bringing to the slumber party. Clarence jumps in, sticking gummy worms in his nose and play-hitting Melessica. Cortland asks if Kimby invited him, but before she can answer, Clarence gives them all a big hug. During lunch, Jeff and Sumo wonder what to do that night. When they ask Clarence, he says he can't go because he's attending Kimby's party. Jeff warns him he probably shouldn't, but Clarence goes anyway, arriving at Kimby's house covered in gummy worms. As Kimby walks Clarence to her room, he happily says he'll have fun with anyone, but is soon horrified to realize it's a slumber party, not a general sleepover. The girls are quietly playing with dolls, and Clarence's usual antics make them uncomfortable. Back at Jeff's house, Jeff draws spiral circles while Sumo tosses stuffed dinosaurs with a beanbag chair, but both get bored without Clarence. Clarence nervously tries to join the girls' games, but struggles to fit in. Meanwhile, Jeff and Sumo play a board game, but chaos ensues when Sumo zones out. While eating cookies, Clarence notices Melessica is upset that Jeff may not like her. He cheerfully offers to hook her up with Jeff, even though she doesn't want him to, while Kimby and Cortland are excited by the idea. The phone rings at Jeff's house, but Melessica is too scared to answer. Clarence pretends to be her, and tells Jeff he's an upstanding gent. Afterward, Jeff and Sumo talk about the call, while Cortland asks how Clarence even talks like that. Clarence, meanwhile, shows Kimby and Melessica how to have fun the Clarence way, doing various silly activities together. Jeff tries to call Melessica back. Sumo stops him. Jeff argues that Clarence would approve, but Sumo points out that Clarence isn't there. He's at the slumber party. Jeff and Sumo start teasing Clarence for doing girly things, and Jeff even hits Sumo with a pillow, causing him to giggle like they were at a slumber party. Meanwhile, Clarence and the girls continue having fun, sharing gummy worms on the sidewalk and laughing about their adventures. Melessica feels guilty for not telling Jeff how she really feels, so Clarence encourages her to speak up. Inspired Melessica, Clarence and the girls head over to Jeff's house. Ironically, Jeff and Sumo are already doing the girly things they thought were weird, dancing to a song. Kimby suggests they all return to her house to throw sticks at each other, which everyone agrees to, and Melessica ends up losing her crush on Jeff. Clarence goes back with Jeff and Sumo, and both are happy he's back. Jeff asks if Melessica said anything about him, but Clarence reassures him that there are plenty of girls who wouldn't be in the Jeff business, and calls him an upstanding gent. Jeff suddenly realizes it was Clarence on the phone, and the screen cuts to black as he screams in disgust. Clarence is telling a story about an adventure he had with some kids, exaggerating every detail, but Jeff doesn't believe a word of it. Soon Joshua arrives and tells Clarence, Jeff, Sumo, and Percy that the hike has been cancelled because Nature Kate has to save a baby goat, leaving the kids disappointed. Clarence asks Joshua why he told Kate he loves her on the phone, and Joshua admits they are romantically involved. Clarence mentions that he heard their relationship is on the rocks and that Kate thinks Joshua is lazy, angry, and lacks ambition. This makes Joshua angry, so he decides to take all of them on a hike to Sheep's Bridge. Sumo warns that it looks dangerous, which is exactly why Joshua wants to go there. They all pile into Joshua's car, but the rough terrain causes parts of the vehicle to start falling off. Sumo punches Joshua's seat while Clarence sings loudly, and the car nearly hits a big rock, which Joshua narrowly avoids. Percy asks Joshua to open a milk carton, and soon more parts of the car fall off. Percy spits out his milk, distracting Joshua, and the car bumps into a bunch of cacti. Hours pass and the car begins smoking. The hood flies off, and Sumo starts kicking the seat after Joshua tells him to stop punching it. Joshua grows so frustrated that he decides to turn the car around and head home. Clarence doesn't want to go home, so he, Jeff, and Sumo chant turn around. Joshua turns up the radio and speeds up, but soon all the wheels pop off and the car starts sliding uncontrollably before finally stopping. Joshua steps out to see the damage, while Sumo runs off wildly, leaving the others behind. 3 hours later, Clarence, Jeff, Percy, and Joshua check their phones to try to get a signal. Clarence has full bars, but before he can use his phone, a bird swoops in and snatches it. 4 hours later, the group is walking through the desert. Clarence insists that Nature Kate magically got them there in just 20 minutes and even brought granola. Joshua gets frustrated and tells someone else to lead, but Clarence volunteers to be the leader and the others follow him. 5 hours later, as darkness falls, no one knows where they are until Clarence peeks behind some tall grass and discovers they've arrived at Sheep's Bridge. Joshua is shocked and the kids start exploring. Clarence asks him to find some matches, which Joshua thinks is impossible in the wild, but as soon as Clarence leaves to hunt, a box of matches falls on Joshua's head, making him start to believe Clarence has magical powers. Clarence then announces he found a hot tub, and although Joshua thinks he's lost it, it's real. Clarence and Percy get in first, then Jeff joins, and finally Clarence convinces Joshua to enter too. Later, the four relax in the hot tub, and Clarence looks at the stars, imagining aliens watching them, and thinking the aliens aren't having as much fun. Joshua doesn't respond at first, but then he gets excited, starts planning how they could live at Sheep's Bridge, and even begins assigning rooms. While showing where the ballroom would be, he dances too close to the edge and falls off a cliff. The kids rush to help, forming a human chain, but Percy loses his grip, causing Clarence to fall onto Joshua. Suddenly, Sumo and Nature Kate arrive and rescue them. Kate drives everyone safely home, and Joshua admits he's not cut out for nature, suggesting they should break up. Kate says that's fine, she's already seeing someone named Damien. Just then, Sumo's goat accidentally bites Joshua's ear, causing him to freak out. In the treehouse, Julian, Sumo, Dustin, and Emilio race lobsters, and Sumo's wins by sticking its claw ahead of the others. During a break, Dustin secretly puts a skateboard under his lobster, but Jeff disqualifies him. Clarence then arrives with Chelsea, shocking the boys. Jeff blows his whistle since girls aren't allowed, but Clarence explains that the treehouse is cool because nothing is too gross or scary. Sumo adds there's a special door if she can't handle gross things, though Chelsea insists she can, and the boys cheer for Sumo. Clarence calls an emergency huddle, arguing that Chelsea should be allowed in. Sumo suggests testing how much gross stuff she can handle, and the boys agree, except for Clarence and Jeff, who propose playing games instead. The boys start showing Chelsea all sorts of gross things, but she isn't fazed. Clarence then shows her a bag of Mary's toys, which Chelsea thinks are cool. Jeff tries to show something neat, an uncracked geode, but it breaks. releasing a terrible smell. Clarence wants Jeff to smell it, but Jeff ends up vomiting outside the treehouse. Sumo tries to see if Chelsea will be grossed out, but she isn't. Clarence then tells a story about a goose whose egg exploded in his mouth, covering him in green goo. The other boys are grossed out, but Chelsea remains unfazed, proving she can handle anything the boys throw at her and earns her place in the treehouse. Sumo tells Chelsea he has stories so gross they'll make her wish she could erase her brain, and Chelsea fires back that her stories are so gross they'll melt Sumo's brain. Clarence gets the idea that they can all take turns telling gross stories for fun, and everyone agrees. Emilio goes first, telling a story about scaring his sister by jumping out of a closet. She screams and slams the door on him, hitting his foot, and Emilio exaggerates that there was blood everywhere. Jeff feels queasy, but Chelsea isn't grossed out. Clarence suggests Sumo go next, but he says he's not in the mood, so he tries spitting on the floor to gross Chelsea out, but she spits back at him. Next, Julian shares a story about being taken to the hospital after something bit his arm and how the doctor had to use tweezers to pull a worm out. The boys cheer, and Chelsea admits it's gross, but says she's seen worse on the internet. Jeff is disturbed by the image, and Clarence encourages him to tell a story. Hesitant at first, Jeff describes the shower drain backing up and rising water forcing him to scream. Clarence exaggerates that the water flooded the house and everyone was barfing, but Jeff corrects him. His story doesn't amuse anyone, so he tries to retell it, but Dustin interrupts, announcing he has a story to share next. Dustin starts with a quick story about dreaming he fell off a boat and got stuck in the ocean, but it turns out to be a joke. Clarence then tells a wildly confusing story about walking through a field of broccoli and worms, where he sees a two-headed tiger made of garbage stuffed with goo, peanut butter, jelly, and other strange things. Everyone in the treehouse stares at him in disbelief. Finally, Sumo tells his gross story about his family driving to Florida and stopping at Fishy Phil's for lunch, even though it's 200 miles from the nearest body of water. Chelsea interrupts, guessing that his whole family got sick, which makes Sumo annoyed. He asks Chelsea for her gross stories, and she shares a story about jumping on a trampoline and doing a flip. Sumo predicts she broke her arm and exposes the bone, so Chelsea challenges him to do better. They keep interrupting each other, claiming they've already heard the other's story. Out of nowhere, Chelsea and Sumo kiss as a last attempt to gross each other out, which horrifies everyone. Everyone screams and runs out except Clarence. He happily thinks Chelsea and Sumo are falling in love and imagines them having kids together. Meanwhile, Chelsea and Sumo flee the treehouse, screaming in horror. As the others vomit outside, Clarence goes back inside, unbothered, and happily continues playing with the lobsters all by himself. Exactly 78.5 years in the future, Jeff and Sumo argue about how they first met at a retirement home. Sumo insists it was at a place called Rough Raiders Chicken, while Jeff corrects him, saying it was actually Rough Riders Chicken. Clarence interrupts them, claiming he knows the true story, and starts memorizing the details as movers transport Sumo's fish tank. During Clarence's reminiscence, the events from the pilot flash back in a musical montage showing Clarence and Sumo teaching Jeff how to play with Clarence's mystery piñata. After the montage, Jeff and Sumo disagree with Clarence's version, so he explains that their memories are probably fuzzy. Clarence then gets up and goes for a jog, while Larry writes down everything that happened. The camera zooms out to reveal that the retirement home is on a spacecraft, with many of Clarence's classmates now elderly like the boys. Later, Clarence jogs on a treadmill, performing various antics, but he eventually falls off his robotic legs and gets trapped, shouting for someone to get him off this crazy thing. On Monday, Clarence is eating his Rough Riders chicken at lunch and decides to try the new cinnamon ranch sauce, but he finds it gross. Jeff and Sumo try it too and love it. Later in class, Clarence is presenting his report, but Ms. Baker cuts him off because she has a meeting. Clarence pretends he needs to go to the bathroom so he can sneak into the meeting. There, he sees Rough Riders employees showing a video that the school district plans to partner with Rough Riders Chicken, which excites Clarence. On Tuesday, Clarence tells Jeff and Sumo about the plan, explaining that the cafeteria will serve Rough Riders chicken and the library will be fixed up. Jeff admits he has a bad feeling about the plan, but decides to ignore it. Later on Wednesday, the Rough Riders library opens, offering both books and chicken with sauce. In the new Rough Riders classroom, Clarence asks Jeff why math hasn't started. Jeff, acting unusually forgetful, admits he forgot. He also nearly finishes a coupon book, and when some sauce spills on it, he licks it off, which is very out of character for him. Thursday comes, and Aberdale Elementary is now renamed Rough Riders Elementary. Josh leads a school assembly celebrating the success and sponsorship, and everyone is hypnotized except Clarence. When Clarence asks Jeff why the plan feels like a takeover, Jeff responds in a hypnotized voice that Clarence is starting to sound like he does not believe in Team Rough Riders. On a Friday, the cafeteria has been fully transformed into a Rough Riders restaurant, with children serving food and random adults eating inside the school. Clarence enters and looks for Jeff and Sumo, soon finding Jeff working in the new restaurant. Clarence asks where Sumo is, but Jeff doesn't answer and walks away, leaving Clarence calling after him. Upset, Clarence runs out, noticing that both kids and adults seem brainwashed. He remembers the previous days and realizes that the sauce was the main cause, so he decides to stop Joshua. In the gym, Joshua and Sumo are surrounded by mysterious men wearing chicken beaks. In a cult-like scene, Joshua gives Sumo a chalice filled with sauce. Clarence bursts in riding a small wheeled platform and launches himself at Joshua, spilling the chalice, hitting Sumo, returning him to normal, and knocking over candles, starting a fire. Joshua falls into the flames, revealing his true form as a half-chicken, half-man creature. Clarence and Sumo escape, and Clarence's heroes, Nature Kate, Keith Mack, Rake Backburn, and Don Delano arrive and destroy Rough Riders Elementary, defeating the brainwashed adults. Back in class, Clarence explains to the students why Rough Riders chicken is his favorite food, and the students cheer, revealing that the entire chaotic adventure was actually Clarence's school report. A group of people is chasing Clarence, and after a log falls off a cliff, he flies through the air. The scene then pauses to show Bucky O'Neill sitting by a fireplace, who decides to tell the story of how Clarence got into all that trouble. The story begins in the treehouse, where Clarence is crying about Butterscotch the pig being chased every year at the Greased Pig Chase. Sumo and Jeff try to calm him down, but Jeff assumes pigs don't have feelings, which makes Clarence cry even harder. Clarence and Sumo try to come up with a solution, and Jeff jokingly suggests dressing Clarence up as a pig to take Butterscotch's place. Before Jeff can finish saying it was a joke, Clarence and Sumo run out of the treehouse to get ready. They enter a barn where Butterscotch is sleeping in a cart, and Clarence and Sumo try several ways to get her out. After a few failed attempts, Sumo climbs into the cart, and Butterscotch jumps out, hitting her head on a barrel and knocking herself out. Clarence and Sumo carry the unconscious pig away, and Jeff worries she might run back to the barn, so he suggests hiding her until the race is over. At the treehouse, Clarence and Sumo lift Butterscotch up to Jeff with a rope, but they let go at the wrong moment, causing her to fall on top of Jeff. Later, Sumo greases Clarence all over, gives him a hat with pig ears, and adds a curly tail. Clarence climbs into Butterscotch's cart as Sumo walks away, ready for the race. That night, Clarence lies in the cart when two kids, Cooter and Seabass, peek inside. They mistake Clarence for Butterscotch and say he'll be easier to catch because of how big he looks. Back at the treehouse, Butterscotch is still sitting on Jeff, keeping him from sleeping, which makes Bucky O'Neill laugh before returning to the story. The next day, the annual Greased Pig Chase begins, and Donna Jo Judley welcomes everyone. As Sumo gets ready, Cooter and Seabass talk to him about catching the pig. Donna Jo tells Randall to grease the pig, who is actually Clarence. When the race starts, Cooter knocks Sumo down, but he quickly gets up and starts running. Clarence is released from the cart and sees everyone running toward him, so he runs, dodging everyone as best he can. Surrounded, he jumps in the middle of the crowd and finally leaps over the fence, allowing the chase to continue outside the pen. Jeff watches through binoculars and tells Butterscotch she's lucky she's not being chased, but she suddenly jumps out of the treehouse, and Jeff grabs her by the rope, breaking part of the wall. Meanwhile, Clarence continues being chased through the woods. Standing on a log, he falls through and sees Sumo calling him from outside. Seabass and Cooter find Clarence in the log and mistake him for a talking pig, continuing to chase him. Sumo goes inside to help, and the log rolls off a cliff, sending Clarence flying into a puddle. The grease washes off, revealing that the pig was Clarence all along, which causes chaos as everyone demands the real Butterscotch. Butterscotch runs past with Jeff chasing her, and the crowd follows. Back at the pig pen, Donna Jo is bored until the contestants return chasing Butterscotch, and she declares Jeff the winner. The crowd erupts in anger, and Clarence, Jeff, Sumo, and Butterscotch escape. The chaos escalates, forcing firefighters and police to arrive, prompting Bucky O'Neill to stop the story, telling Damien it's too wild to show the kids. Clarence and Sumo are having a staring contest, which Sumo wins, but only because he spaced out. Meanwhile, Jeff is looking through a telescope, and Clarence wonders if he's spying on someone. Jeff explains that there's going to be a meteor shower at 4 a.m. and shows Clarence and Sumo information about it on the computer. Sumo spots an option to report a fireball and wants Jeff to click it, but Jeff reminds him that filing a false report isn't allowed. As Jeff continues talking about the meteor shower, Clarence looks through the telescope and notices a man working on a telephone pole. Jeff hopes the man will finish before the shower begins. Soon, Jeff pushes Clarence and Sumo out of his room, telling them to come back at 3:45 a.m. when he's rested, then shuts the door. At 8 p.m., Jeff turns off the lights and closes his eyes, but Clarence returns and suggests they stay up all night. Jeff doesn't see the point at first, but Clarence convinces him that he could have a dream where he thinks he woke up and missed the meteor shower. Jeff agrees, and Clarence and Sumo celebrate. By 10 p.m., Sumo is balancing on a chair while Clarence eats popcorn. When Clarence finishes, he asks if it's 4 yet, and Jeff says it isn't. Clarence gets bored, but Jeff mentions he's having fun reading about the great historical masterminds of astronomy. Sumo says he's hungry and suggests getting hamburgers, which Jeff agrees to because going outside will help him study the stars, just like Copernicus, whom he shows them in his book. Outside, Clarence spins in circles down the sidewalk while Sumo hits things with a stick, and Jeff searches for constellations. Clarence falls and points out a meteor in the sky, but it turns out to be an airplane. Sumo sees a bat and chases it, but the bat escapes, causing Sumo to bump into a garbage can and angrily hit it with his stick. Randy's dad yells out the window about the noise, so the boys run away. Clarence spots the gas station, Night Bites, and tells Jeff and Sumo to come inside. Sumo joins him, but Jeff stays outside. Inside the store, Clarence notices Sumo looks tired, but Sumo hides it by pulling his shirt collar over his face and knocking things over as he walks around. Clarence goes to the counter wearing red sunglasses and asks for energizing snacks, while the clerk laughs, guessing they're trying to cause trouble. Sumo grabs ketchup packets and stomps them, making more mess. Clarence looks at the hot dogs and imagines one with his own face, asking Sumo if the store seems freaky or if it's just him. Sumo says minds can play tricks when you stay awake all night, and even though he sees everything wiggly, he denies it. Outside, Jeff tries to use the dirty restroom but screams when he sees a head on the floor and crashes into a lamppost, knocking himself out. When he wakes, he's in the woods riding a grocery cart with Clarence while Sumo pushes. Jeff notices he lost his pants, and Clarence explains they removed them because he peed himself. Even though they're a bit lost, they have a toy frog, Mr. Jr., as a guide. Jeff angrily kicks Mr. Jr., upsetting Clarence, then grabs his map to try and find their way home. A little while later, the boys are still in the woods. Sumo slaps himself to stay awake, but suddenly, one of the grocery cart's wheels gets stuck in a tree root. Clarence suggests they ask the tree for directions. When he puts his hand on the tree trunk, it seems like his arm becomes part of the tree, but it's just a hallucination. Sumo eats something off a tree, and Jeff tells him to spit it out, but Sumo swallows it and starts poking Jeff's face, thinking he's changing the shape of his head. Jeff gets angry and declares he won't let Clarence and Sumo ruin this special night, but soon he starts hallucinating too, seeing Copernicus calling his name. Jeff follows him and accidentally knocks over the grocery cart. Clarence warns him not to run off, then sees the grocery cart and Mr. Jr. sinking in the mud. He rescues Mr. Jr. and tells Sumo to hold it, only to realize Sumo has disappeared. Clarence asks Mr. Jr. for directions, then sees its head wobbling and coming off, which gives him a clue about where Sumo went. Clarence follows the trail, leaving a long streak of colors behind him. Sumo shows up and eats one of the colors, but spits it onto a leaf, which grows eyes and legs and starts walking. Sumo stomps on it, then imagines other tiny creatures and stomps on them too. Meanwhile, Jeff peeks through a bush and sees Copernicus, who asks him to walk with him. As Clarence looks at a rainbow-colored portal, bunched up heads pop out of his shoulders, and he accidentally kicks Mr. Jr. into it. Clarence jumps in, but it turns out to be just a puddle. Jeff and Copernicus continue through the woods, and Copernicus tells Jeff to look at the stars. Jeff imagines giant, colorful stars filling the sky, while their heads float around and stars shoot out of Copernicus's eyes. Sumo stomps on the tiny objects, imagining his head changing shape and growing a giant tongue to eat them, but in reality, he's just munching on leaves. Jeff is in a starry fantasy world, jumping from star to star, and Copernicus tells him he must find his missing constellation. Clarence imagines his fingers growing long, and putting his hair, nose, and eyes in his mouth, replacing them with a big blue nose and mismatched eyes. In Jeff's fantasy, he completes the constellation, which forms Copernicus's head. Copernicus congratulates him, but Clarence's head appears and knocks Copernicus down. Jeff gets angry. Clarence then becomes a floating green alien, making popping sounds, and Jeff pushes him away. Jeff continues running on the stars, and finds Copernicus, who begins handing him his hair. Clarence calls Jeff in reality, making Copernicus disappear. Jeff digs in the dirt for him. Clarence imagines Jeff with a computer for a head, while Jeff sees Clarence as a pig. Jeff complains that Clarence ruined the night, and tells Mr. Jr. to be quiet, upsetting Clarence. Jeff cries, and Sumo and Clarence start crying too. Clarence kicks Mr. Jr. away, and the three run into an empty sports hall, collapsing on the ground. Clarence asks why Mr. Jr. left. Sumo says the tiny objects have won, and Jeff declares staying up all night was the worst idea. Jeff then spots a meteor, and the others see it too, but it was just their imagination.
imagination. Randy's dad complains about a fire. Back in Jeff's room, Jeff tries to report a fireball, but falls asleep on the keyboard, leaving a long line of "Yee" after his name. Clarence is showing Chelsea and Mavis around his homemade haunted house in the garage, but neither of them finds it scary. Chelsea suggests they go trick-or-treating, which makes Clarence remember a previous Halloween, when he got spooked by a ghost decoration in Gail's bathroom, and ran down the street farting. Clarence admits he's too old to trick-or-treat, but really, he's just too scared. At that moment, Chelsea's older brother Glary drives by to give her an orange shirt, and mentions he's going to a high school Halloween party she can't attend. Chelsea gets mad, and decides they'll all go to Glary's party instead, and Clarence, Jeff, and Sumo decide to tag along. As they walk to the party, Sumo notices an old house on a hill, and he and Chelsea speculate about what's inside. Chelsea imagines a cloud of spirits, Sumo thinks there's a rat man, and Jeff, ever the realist, fears a cult growing vegetables. Clarence says they're all being big babies, claiming he's not scared, but the others walk ahead toward Glary's haunted house. When they arrive, Clarence isn't scared, but he accidentally ruins the party a little. While Glary flirts with a girl, Chelsea throws the orange shirt at him, making him fall and knock everything over. Glary threatens to tell his mom, which only makes him look uncool, so he and his friends chase the group out. The group loses Glary, and Mavis gets separated after she runs into a fire hydrant and bolts into the old house on the hill. Clarence decides they have to go inside to rescue her. Jeff hesitates at first, but when he sees homegrown vegetables on the ground, he follows in fear. Clarence, Chelsea, Sumo, and Jeff enter the old house, and Clarence spots a slice of cake on the stairs, which Jeff immediately thinks is a trap. They hear Mavis crying somewhere inside, but Chelsea, Sumo, and Jeff struggle to figure out where it's coming from. Clarence decides they should split up. He heads upstairs while giving the others directions. Upstairs, Clarence sees a white sheet floating by and wonders if it's Mavis. Meanwhile, Sumo and Chelsea argue about whether they're dealing with a rat man or baby spirits. In another room, Jeff calls for Mavis and finds her listening to music. When he tries to turn it off, she pushes him away. Jeff notices pictures of a cult on the wall and gets scared, then sees Mavis put a ladle in her mouth. He worries it could be dangerous and tries to remove it. Clarence finishes another slice of cake and follows the white sheet while hearing strange sound effects. He finds a pumpkin in a wheelchair, thinking Mavis has been turned into it by a witch. The white sheet creeps up on him, chasing him through the hall. Sumo and Chelsea hear rattling in a cabinet and hug each other in fear. Clarence, now panicked, pushes the wheelchair with the pumpkin and yells that he's the scarer. He jumps on the ghost and punches it repeatedly. A nurse turns on the lights, revealing the house is actually a home for the elderly. The ghost was just an old man in a white sheet who made the weird sounds because he was a sound effects guy in the 1960s. Clarence joins him, having fun making sounds, and Sumo and the others enter. Chelsea confirms there's no rat man, but the nurse warns it's real, and a furry hand emerges from a cabinet, grabbing a rat.
Clarence was playing soccer with some kids, but instead of focusing on the game, he watched clouds and described their shapes. Gilbin scored a goal, and the kids got mad at Clarence for not doing anything. Belson forced Clarence to retrieve the ball, so he hid in a bush and slid down the cliff. The ball landed on the sidewalk, but a crowd carried it into an office building. Inside, Clarence grabbed the ball and accidentally touched a woman's computer mouse. She assumed he was the boss's son and told everyone he had arrived. Clarence got into the elevator, but the same crowd followed him because they didn't like the boss's son. He pushed a man with the ball and got off on the third floor, the mailroom. Clarence followed Janice, the mail woman, and helped deliver mail, though he mostly just threw letters to a few people. He left the sales floor, tried to help men shredding papers, but they ignored him, so he wandered around the building. Next, Clarence found a glass-covered room where people discussed a new building model. Thinking it was his brown town, he insisted they paint it brown, but a woman warned it would be expensive. He discovered the boss's special line elevator and learned it led to the boss's office. An old man joked about asking for a raise, and everyone encouraged Clarence to do it. When he tried to escape, a man named Fritz stopped him and gave him a suit. In the kitchen, Noah taught Clarence about chumps and big boys, scaring him, then gave him a sandwich, coffee, and a business card. Clarence went to the sales room, received a computer, and printed lots of penny images, telling an employee to cut them out and keep making more. Clarence calls Jeff, asking him to guess where he's calling from. A fly appears and Clarence starts swatting it, saying all sorts of bad things about it. Unbeknownst to him, a group of people in a room are listening. When Clarence tells the fly it's useless, they whisper to each other. Clarence notices an employee talking through the phone, gets scared, and ends the call. His actions cause the numbers to drop, sending everyone in the office into chaos. Clarence tries to stop the panic, but finds Janice and apologizes for the mess. Fritz and Janice send him to the boss's elevator, claiming his father wants to chat. On the boss floor, Clarence remembers Noah's warning about chumps getting chopped. The boss asks if Clarence is his son, and Clarence believes he is. The boss requests juice, but Clarence accidentally throws the bottle into a potted plant, breaking it. The boss recounts the day's chaos, including the creative team painting projects brown, Fritz running around in birth suit and losing a foreign deal. Clarence hides under his suit, afraid of being fired. The boss reassures him and shows a photo of himself, Cynthia, and Belson, revealing he is Mr. Knowles. He predicts Clarence will take over one day, then asks him to burn confidential documents. Once Clarence finishes, the NDB arrive, handcuff Mr. Knowles, and put out the fire. Janice reveals she's been undercover for 5 years. Before she can finish, Fritz exposes Clarence's bugged suit and Janice kisses him. The NDB takes Mr. Knowles away, leaving Clarence as the new boss. Tired of being alone, he announces he's leaving, sings a goodbye song about Browntown, and receives the soccer ball back from the tube. Clarence returns to the cliff where the kids played, gives Belson the ball, and watches clouds with the others until Belson gets mad again. Clarence, Jeff, and Sumo are making phone jokes when Clarence randomly dials a number and reaches Bella. Clarence and Bella talk late into the night while Jeff and Sumo play together. When it gets dark, Mary sends Clarence to bed. The next day, Bella writes a song for Clarence and makes him listen while he draws. Later, they play a game, Guessing Sounds. At dinner, Clarence puts a megaphone on the phone so Chad and Mary can hear Bella too. The following day, Clarence ignores Jeff and Sumo to talk to Bella, making them angry. Bella tries talking to Clarence about her birthday, but he's distracted and doesn't answer, so she tells him he's too busy. The next day, Clarence joins Jeff and Sumo jumping off a small hill, but stops when he remembers he forgot Bella's birthday. He wants to call her, but she doesn't answer, leaving him sad. He sends many messages to Bella, which her mother listens to. Seeing Clarence sad, Mary arranges a meeting with Bella's mom so they can meet in person. At the event, Clarence gives Bella her gift, and they spend time talking about the series The Mooms. As they chat and fall asleep, Clarence accidentally falls off the swing, ending the day with a laugh. A video shows how Americans first landed on the moon, and Clarence asks Miss Baker where the moon goes during the day. She explains and jokingly suggests the moon controls your thoughts, then reminds the class about the rocket show. When the bell rings, Belson and Sumo must stay with Miss Baker because they're at risk of summer school. Belson offers Sumo a spot on his team to win easily, but Sumo refuses, angering Belson, who leaves with Percy. Meanwhile, Jeff and Sumo discuss the rocket while Clarence worries about the moon. Sumo invites Clarence and Jeff to his house to build the rocket. At Sumo's house, Clarence decorates himself to protect against the moon, while Jeff calls other mothers to gather information on competitors' rockets. Sumo gets annoyed when his father mentions helping with summer school, then Belson mocks him in his car before leaving. Sumo focuses on building the rocket, and the next day, Jeff sneaks to Belson's team to sabotage their rocket. Clarence had left early, so Sumo explains where he went. At Clarence's house, he decorates his room in aluminum foil to protect against the moon, and Chad comforts him, explaining life is amazing. Clarence makes a heart out of foil in the garden before going inside for breakfast. On launch day, Sumo mocks Belson's rocket, but quickly builds a healthier one. Clarence gives Sumo the foil heart, and Miss Baker announces the launch. Sumo struggles, but catches up to Belson's rocket, though Belson's team wins. Miss Baker praises Sumo for his effort, saying he won't have to attend summer school. That night, Clarence, Jeff, and Sumo watch the sky from Sumo's roof, and Sumo's rocket finally reaches the moon. At Jeff's house, Clarence, Jeff, and Sumo are getting ready for a snack when Sue arrives with a compost bin full of worms. She explains they need to feed their food scraps to the worms. Jeff is grossed out, but Sue assures him the worms aren't so bad and that they give fertilizer for the garden. Just then, Mel comes to pick up Clarence and Sumo, leaving Clarence disappointed that he can't feed the worms. Sue keeps the compost under the sink, which disgusts Jeff, and when one worm crawls out, he panics, but Sue explains it's normal. That night, Jeff is scared while sleeping, and Clarence sneaks in to feed the worms. The next morning, Jeff sees that the worms have escaped the bin because Clarence overfed them, making him feel sick. At school, Jeff tells Clarence and Sumo about earthworms while Clarence takes Jeff's sausage. That night, Jeff becomes paranoid, covering doors, surrounding his bed with salt, and keeping a bat nearby, yet he barely sleeps. In the morning, he sees Sue and the worms again, hearing the same explanation as before. Despite his efforts, he can't stop the worms from escaping. The next day, Jeff considers removing the compost, but Clarence just wants to feed the worms. Later, Jeff hatches a plan with Clarence and Sumo to move the bin. At night, while EJ and Sue are distracted, the kids sneak the compost out of the sink. They stumble, spilling the worms, and Clarence worries about them, but Jeff realizes he caused the chaos. He celebrates thinking the worms are gone, only for them to crawl on him, and Clarence reassures him they're harmless. The next morning, Jeff is left smelling worm poop. Clarence is upset that Aberdale hasn't seen any snow, but when a news reporter jokes about a low-pressure cloud bringing snow, he immediately calls Sumo, Jeff, and Belson. Belson is busy playing a game with his cousin, who doesn't get along with him. Gary Mooch answers the phone, making strange noises, then cuts the call and takes the game controller away from Belson. Clarence rushes over to Belson's house, where Gary Mooch opens the door and Belson arrives shortly after. Gary Mooch throws a paper at them, and Clarence sits at the table to eat cookies with both boys. Belson opens a Christmas present he doesn't like and gives it to Clarence, while Gary Mooch throws milk, leaving Cynthia to clean. Belson offers to buy games with Clarence in exchange for opening his Game Buddy too early, but he takes too long to decide. Clarence feels down seeing how Belson treats his cousin. Suddenly it starts snowing and Clarence gets excited, showing Belson outside. When they return, Belson discovers Gary Mooch already playing with the Game Buddy 2, which sparks a fight. Clarence tries to separate them, but Gary Mooch runs off with the console. Clarence and Belson chase him, and by then, the snow has become heavier. They catch up, and another fight breaks out. Clarence jumps on them, making them fall and accidentally breaking the Game Buddy 2. Belson and Gary Mooch get mad at him, but then start throwing snowballs at him. Despite the chaos, Clarence is happy seeing the boys finally getting along. Mr. Reese announces the school's award winners, but Jeff is unlucky. None are for him. The most punctual award goes to Darley, the most active reader is Breen, and the most studious is Percy. Meanwhile, children and adults share their stories about Mariano. Clarence remembers being saved by Mariano as a child when he fell off the Rough Rider's chicken statue, and Mariano placed a pizza on the ground to break his fall. Miss Baker shares how Mariano cheered her up by handing her a heart-shaped pizza when she was upset about breaking up with Damien. Percy goes on stage to tell his story. While riding his bike, a wheel punctured and Mariano replaced it with a pizza. Jeff gets frustrated and Sumo shares his story. He was putting rubber bands on a watermelon, but just before it exploded, Mariano saved him by throwing himself on the ground. The audience raises a loyalty sign for Mariano. Miss Shoop tells her story. Once she asked for pizza, but Mariano didn't have normal boxes, so he divided it into many small boxes, which she used to make a doghouse. Clarence hugs Miss Shoop, while Chelsea and Chad explain how Mariano taught them to distribute pizza properly. Camden adds that Mariano gave him a pizza without any allergens. Through all the stories, everyone celebrates Mariano's kindness, showing how one person's actions, even with something as simple as pizza, can leave a big impact on the community. Gilbin goes next, telling his story. A black background appears with a red bulge and pizzas with mouths start approaching him. Suddenly, Mariano arrives and deletes the pizzas. The audience laughs and Mr. Reese declares Gilbin's story the best. Then Jeff receives the Best Smile award and goes on stage. At first, no one pays attention, so he explains the truth behind the Mariano memories. Mariano used distilled water when saving Clarence. The pizza on Percy's bike was crushed and ruined the bicycle. Mr. Kishikoni actually taught Chad and Chelsea to split pizzas using pie charts, and when Mariano fell with the exploding watermelon, it really happened outside Miss Baker's apartment. Jeff even comments that it's disturbing Mariano knew about their relationships. Belson gets emotional, almost crying, and tells his story. When he broke his bones, Mariano gave him sauce that made him feel better. Jeff calls Mariano a weirdo, and everyone becomes sad. Percy even says he doesn't want to go on living. Jeff selfishly mutters, "That's better," and tries to explain his prize, but no one listens. He then shares his own bad Mariano memory. On his 7th birthday, he was eating pizza. The filling fell on his shirt, and being a perfectionist, he freaked out. Samson points out it was Papa Mariano's fault. Sumo convinces Jeff to let go of the bad memory. At that moment, Mariano arrives. The children leave the gym, leaving Jeff alone, and when they return, they see Mariano disguised as Jeff. He opens a giant curtain on the roof, pouring countless pizzas down, but he stumbles and falls. The mayor of Aberdale is playing with his toy airplane when a man interrupts him, asking him to sign more papers. One paper defines the border between Aberdale Elementary and West Aberdale Elementary. The mayor draws a straight line, putting Sumo's house on the new school's border. At school, teachers discuss the changes, and Mr. Reese shouts out the window that Sumo is moving to a different school. Sumo and Jeff stay calm, but Clarence panics, claiming he'll never see Sumo again. At Sumo's house, Jeff tries on Sumo's uniform shirt, while Sumo rips his pants to look like his old ones. Seeing Jeff in the shirt, Clarence thinks Jeff is leaving too, and runs off to find all his friends. Sumo convinces him not to panic, but Clarence still struggles with Sumo leaving. At school, he faces problems. Belson won't take his notes, and Jeff doesn't appreciate his lunch antics. To fix things, Clarence and Sumo start using walkie-talkies to stay connected, and soon they don't even notice the difference between their schools. Later, the two friends are back together in their sandbox, digging a tunnel to secretly visit each other's school, showing that even distance can't break their friendship. During a Valentine's activity at school, Clarence asks Miss Baker who her lover is. She nervously answers, while Belson claims he's nobody and gets booed. Chelsea reassures everyone that being single isn't bad. At Sumo's school, a girl reminds Mr. Moser it's Valentine's Day, and Duncan delivers cupcakes to the kids. Later, Clarence invites Miss Baker to his house. At Clarence's home, Chad and Mary are enjoying a romantic night until Miss Baker arrives with Clarence. When Mr. Moser comes, he and Miss Baker awkwardly discuss their matters. Clarence, trying to help, serves juice while calling it a date, which makes Mr. Moser nervous. Clarence reads some things about the two, upsetting them. Sumo adds a disgusting drink, and Clarence prepares a main dish with old mozzarella and excessive salt covering all the food. Mr. Moser tries it, finds it too salty, and ends up drinking Sumo's awful concoction, which makes him spit everything out and accidentally soak Miss Baker, who rushes to her car and accidentally runs over Mr. Moser. In the end, Mr. Moser and Miss Baker eat together, while Clarence happily spreads Valentine hearts throughout the city, celebrating the day in his own chaotic way. Chad and his friends are practicing for their show while Mary worries about what to wear so she doesn't look bad. Clarence, excited, jumps on his bed and finds the shirt he wore in the pilot. Chad's friends think no one will come to the concert, but Clarence encourages them to perform. Mary joins the garage, already dressed but regrets her outfit, upset that Chad let Clarence attend. He reassures her that Clarence is just a huge Dogmern fan. Everyone arrives at Pete's Bolorama for the show. Clarence asks the lady running the sound console about microphones, but finds it confusing and useless. He tries to help by sending Lauren, who is pregnant, to sit down. Mary talks to a couple about her life. Meanwhile, the mind fertilizer show begins. Mary sees Damien there, but is disappointed he's been cured. Chad is surprised the band is still playing, even though their fans are tired. Clarence builds a drum fort, but it breaks. When it's Dogmern's turn, Chad's friends have fallen asleep, so Dogmern has to use Mind Fertilizer's drum set. Just before the show starts, a chili vendor arrives and the guests leave, leaving only the band, Clarence and Mary. Dogmern begins playing. The guests return, and Mary jumps on the crowd. Lauren invites Clarence to play, and everyone cheers, but he breaks the drum. The Mind Fertilizer girl gets angry, and the chili vendor throws chili in her face, sparking chaos. In the end, Mary rescues Clarence, and Chad and his friends celebrate their successful, chaotic show. Chad and Clarence are fixing the roof of the house of Belson while recording themselves. Chad asks Mr. Knowles for $300, but he offers tickets to a game instead. Mr. Knowles leaves Belson with them, so he will go too. At the stadium, a man announces the match and warns about a fan named Hammy, who sneezes on people. Belson goes straight to the VIP room, while Chad and Clarence have to climb to the highest part of the stadium. EJ is also there with Rosie, who is asleep. During the game, Clarence plays with the stadium TV and sees a video of Hammy, which excites him. The game resumes, and spectators do the wave. A player makes an amazing move, and EJ gets furious at Chad and Clarence. Hammy sneaks near Clarence, who chases him, while Belson plays a sports game with local employees. Clarence goes to the food court, thinking he lost Hammy, but Hammy appears on TV joking with Chad. At first, Chad laughs, but Hammy's behavior starts to annoy him. Just as Hammy is about to sneeze on Chad, Clarence throws dressings at him, getting sneezed on himself, and he's thrilled to be sneezed on by his idol. Suddenly Mitch, covered in what Hammy sneezed, attacks him but is stopped, and the police arrest Mitch. Chad and Clarence leave the stadium, and Chad remembers belatedly that he forgot to take Belson with them. Chelsea, Jeff, and Percy play a game called Dare or Die, where they ask kids to choose between two options. Clarence chooses Dare, and they challenge him to steal one of Miss Shoop's beans. He tries but fails. Feeling curious, Clarence asks Jeff if Miss Shoop has friends. Jeff says no, calling her a terrible person, which makes Clarence a little sad for her. Clarence spies on Miss Shoop and follows her to her car, noticing how lonely she seems. She sees him and drives away, so Clarence follows her to her house. He tries to enter, but she shuts the door. Determined, Clarence jumps into a bush full of thorns, shouting "ow," until she lets him in to clean off the thorns. Inside, he discovers all sorts of things in her home. He accidentally floods her bathroom, prompting Shoop to order him out. Clarence resists,
running around while Shoop chases him. During the chaos, Clarence finds Miss Shoop's bean-making room, but is quickly caught and finally leaves with a can of beans. At home, he tries them and finds them delicious, and Mary agrees. Clarence returns to show Miss Shoop how much he likes her beans, and mentions he invited others to try them, but Shoop becomes angry and throws him out again. Later, Miss Shoop prepares her beans but sees everyone in the room and scolds them, forbidding Clarence from returning to her house or even the block. Clarence explains he only wanted her to have friends, but she insists she only needs herself and her beans. When a relative arrives, Clarence takes her away so Shoop can have her house to herself.
Clarence was playing soccer with some kids, but instead of focusing on the game, he watched clouds and described their shapes. Gilbin scored a goal, and the kids got mad at Clarence for not doing anything. Belson forced Clarence to retrieve the ball, so he hid in a bush and slid down the cliff. The ball landed on the sidewalk, but a crowd carried it into an office building. Inside, Clarence grabbed the ball and accidentally touched a woman's computer mouse. She assumed he was the boss's son and told everyone he had arrived. Clarence got into the elevator, but the same crowd followed him because they didn't like the boss's son. He pushed a man with the ball and got off on the 3rd floor, the mailroom. Clarence followed Janice, the mail woman, and helped deliver mail, though he mostly just threw letters to a few people. He left the sales floor, tried to help men shredding papers, but they ignored him, so he wandered around the building. Next, Clarence found a glass-covered room where people discussed a new building model. Thinking it was his brown town, he insisted they paint it brown, but a woman warned it would be expensive. He discovered the boss's special line elevator and learned it led to the boss's office. An old man joked about asking for a raise, and everyone encouraged Clarence to do it. When he tried to escape, a man named Fritz stopped him and gave him a suit. In the kitchen, Noah taught Clarence about chumps and big boys, scaring him, then gave him a sandwich, coffee, and a business card. Clarence went to the sales room, received a computer, and printed lots of penny images, telling an employee to cut them out and keep making more. Clarence calls Jeff, asking him to guess where he's calling from. A fly appears and Clarence starts swatting it, saying all sorts of bad things about it. Unbeknownst to him, a group of people in a room are listening. When Clarence tells the fly it's useless, they whisper to each other. Clarence notices an employee talking through the phone, gets scared, and ends the call. His actions cause the numbers to drop, sending everyone in the office into chaos. Clarence tries to stop the panic, but finds Janice and apologizes for the mess. Fritz and Janice send him to the boss's elevator, claiming his father wants to chat. On the boss floor, Clarence remembers Noah's warning about chumps getting chopped. The boss asks if Clarence is his son, and Clarence believes he is. The boss requests juice, but Clarence accidentally throws the bottle into a potted plant, breaking it. The boss recounts the day's chaos, including the creative team painting projects brown, Fritz running around in birth suit and losing a foreign deal. Clarence hides under his suit, afraid of being fired. The boss reassures him and shows a photo of himself, Cynthia, and Belson, revealing he is Mr. Knowles. He predicts Clarence will take over one day, then asks him to burn confidential documents. Once Clarence finishes, the NDB arrive, handcuff Mr. Knowles, and put out the fire. Janice reveals she's been undercover for 5 years. Before she can finish, Fritz exposes Clarence's bugged suit and Janice kisses him. The NDB takes Mr. Knowles away, leaving Clarence as the new boss. Tired of being alone, he announces he's leaving, sings a goodbye song about Browntown, and receives the soccer ball back from the tube. Clarence returns to the cliff where the kids played, gives Belson the ball, and watches clouds with the others until Belson gets mad again. Clarence, Jeff, and Sumo are making phone jokes when Clarence randomly dials a number and reaches Bella. Clarence and Bella talk late into the night while Jeff and Sumo play together. When it gets dark, Mary sends Clarence to bed. The next day, Bella writes a song for Clarence and makes him listen while he draws. Later, they play a game, Guessing Sounds. At dinner, Clarence puts a megaphone on the phone so Chad and Mary can hear Bella too. The following day, Clarence ignores Jeff and Sumo to talk to Bella, making them angry. Bella tries talking to Clarence about her birthday, but he's distracted and doesn't answer, so she tells him he's too busy. The next day, Clarence joins Jeff and Sumo jumping off a small hill, but stops when he remembers
An adult inserted a tape called Clarence the Movie into the VCR. The film began with Clarence taking a bath with his clothes on while Mary watched him, and Chad entered the scene as Clarence showed him what they were doing. In the following scenes, Clarence played with his toys while Chad briefly entered and then left. At one point, Clarence threw the toys, causing a blue screen to appear that said "without cartridge." The film then briefly showed Sue and EJ and their marriage, before quickly cutting to Jeff and Sumo watching the movie in Clarence's room, though that shot was also interrupted. Next, Clarence and Sumo played with his toys while Jeff looked out the window holding Mr. Sausage, and the scene was cut again. Sumo and Jeff then acted out a fight over a princess, though Jeff only used a toy turtle, ending with a picture of a volcano. Later, Clarence pretended to saw an arm with a cardboard prop, while Sumo added tomato sauce to make it seem realistic. Chad screamed, thinking Clarence had really cut his arm, but Clarence reassured him it was just sauce. Mary was then shown talking to Clarence and Jeff, followed by Clarence in Mary's car going somewhere. The children filmed scenes in the park, focusing on Mr. Reese on a bench, Camden with his grandfather and father, and Chelsea joining in. Clarence dressed Chelsea in the jacket Jeff had worn earlier, and tied Jeff under a children's game, while having Chelsea and Sumo hold hands. The film concluded with Clarence playing music on his toy keyboard, and a slow-motion clip of Sumo laughing on the floor. In the days leading up to summer break, the anniversary of Sumo and Clarence's first haircut, when Clarence had cut Sumo's hair in the pilot, was mentioned. Sumo agreed to let Clarence cut his hair again, but on the actual day, Sumo's friends from school cut his hair instead. Clarence felt betrayed and jealous, realizing that Sumo might be starting to spend more time with his friends than with him. Despite Clarence's many attempts to get closer to Sumo, none of them succeeded, and he began to feel left out. Clarence grew sad thinking that summer was so far away, and that he might not get to spend more time with Sumo until it arrived. Jeff then reminded him that summer actually started the next day, which made Clarence happy. He rushed to the couch they had made together, called Claremoland, and cut the last strand of Sumo's hair that his friends had missed. The group watched in shock as a runaway bulldozer destroyed Sumo's school, a scene reminiscent of Sumo Goes West, but cheered upon realizing that Sumo and his friends no longer needed to attend school. As the school wall crumbled, Ms. Baker and Mr. Mazur were seen inside kissing. Upon seeing this, Clarence expressed excitement, and the words "thank you for watching" appeared around him, signaling the end of the series. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this look at Clarence, make sure to hit like and subscribe for more deep dives into your favorite cartoons. Let us know in the comments which Clarence moment made you laugh the hardest or feel all warm inside. We'll see you in the next video.